Welcome to Ask Cadence, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm sitting here around the round table with new voices for Ask Cadence. I am so impressed. To my right, Connie Plowman, COO of Cadence. Connie, welcome.
Thank you, Pete. It's always a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you. And across from us here, John Patton, president of Cadence. John, what's taking you so long?
Well, happy to be here, Pete. We've finally scheduled a session between trips when I'm in the office. I've been since the first of the year in 2 weeks and out 2 weeks to different parts of the world.
Oh, I'll tell you, I don't know how you do the jet lag.
Well,
you do what you do.
You pay the price.
You pay the price.
Yeah, okay.
Well, let's see if we can get through some of these guerrilla project problems here, clear-headed this morning. The first one comes off of a seminar that you recently did, correct? Yes.
I was in Europe and in an emergency situation had to step in and give the last couple days of a seminar for a seminar leader who had come down with the flu.
Okay, so here's the project problem as I understand it off of the problem card, and I'm going to ask you to elaborate on the problem and your ideas to help solve it. From the card, I am completely stalled on scheduling. I depend on knowing delivery date of a critical piece of equipment ordered by my boss's boss. The equipment was ordered, but the vendor has not committed to a delivery date, and my boss's boss manages this vendor relationship. How do you manage up to get my schedule back on track?
Yes, Pete. This was written on the card, but it came to a head during the scheduling section of the seminar when the person said, I just can't go ahead and ask people to schedule or get them in a room and schedule with them with this going on. And I said, tell me about the organization. Is it pretty hierarchical? Do you have access to your boss's boss? And she said, project manager said, yes, I can visit my boss's boss, but I can't go with empty hands. I just can't go and say, you got to give me a date. And so I gave her some advice before the scheduling activity during class. And said that the first thing we're going to do is in the initial scheduling session, you're going to make an assumption about the delivery date of that piece of equipment. Now, in the scheduling approach that we teach, we have the activity list, which shows the tasks and subtasks of the project, but we also create an assumptions column to the left of that activity list. And wherever there is uncertainty, we make an assumption so that we can continue with scheduling. So I asked her to make an assumption about a date on which that equipment would arrive, and that they would go through the scheduling activity with the members of the project team.
As if the equipment was scheduled to arrive on that date?
On that particular date, yes. And then between the first round of scheduling and the second round of scheduling, to check out that date with other people in the company who had received equipment or been dependent on equipment from that particular vendor. Is this amount of lead time reasonable, and to adjust that as necessary? And then to schedule a visit to her boss's boss and show him the assumption and the dependent tasks after the delivery of that equipment. But since this was a hierarchical, level-conscious society and company, not to ask him for a delivery date on the equipment and not to inform her executive about his obligation to follow up and make the delivery happen. And so then I waited about a month and called her up and said, how did it go? And she was just thrilled. She said that she'd followed my advice and had found out that after her visit to that executive, he'd called the vendor and stressed the delivery date of the project and the number of tasks that were necessary after it, and had gotten a commitment from the vendor, and he called her back and told her the date when the equipment will be delivered. Now, this activity, Pete, really coincides with a foundation behavioral principle in our seminars, and that is support comes from understanding. She wasn't getting any support from that executive 2 levels above her because she had created no understanding about the project, the equipment, and how crucial it was. She went with something in her hand. She went with a schedule. She didn't throw the schedule on the desk. She said, here is a point in the schedule where the equipment is supposed to arrive. Notice that it's backed with an assumption. Notice that there are subsequent tasks after this. And she showed him a drawing, not a list of tasks. So he could see very clearly the subsequent tasks. So she created understanding on the part of that executive, and he was a sharp guy. You know, he took action afterwards now that he saw and understood how critical this equipment was for the project.
Well, I'm really glad you elaborated there, because it's not normally part of the methodology to recommend just putting an arbitrary date on a schedule.
Well, we've done it before on very critical projects, even to the point when a contract was under negotiation in one case, to assume that that contract would be signed by a certain date, and the vendor could supply people to the project team. Sometimes you have to make assumptions to keep things going forward. However, when that happens, you must constantly be checking on that assumption to see if it's coming true. If it's coming true, then project will probably go as scheduled. If it's not coming true, we need to get closer, diagnose further, change the assumption if necessary, take further action, because an assumption that's not coming true says that the rest of the project that's based on that particular assumption is bound to run into serious trouble.
Well, that really shows the power of assumptions, right? Because it's taking something that may appear arbitrary at first glance, but in this case looks to me like a best practice of really creating a reality based on and building understanding based on an assumption you don't have control over.
Well, also, Pete, in our education system, there are many people who have heard this saying, don't make assumptions. They always get you in trouble. And I'd like to modify that says, we make assumptions to survive as human beings. When assumptions are not written down, we forget about them. If assumptions are written down, we have something to check up on, and assumptions are either false or true. And determining at some point in time, as we get closer and closer to real time in the project, that the assumption is either false or true will trigger action or create confidence.
That is a great and very powerful lesson that really comes straight out of what Cadence offers. Thank you so much for sharing that guerrilla project problem this week, John. Good to have you at the table. Connie, thank you for being here. And this has been Ask Cadence. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Pete.